I heard it first, a cry so faint it could have been the wind. Mom kept driving, her eyes fixed on the road ahead as we wound through the abandoned industrial district. The sound came again, clearer this time. A plea for help, desperate and haunting. "Did you hear that?" I asked, but Mom just shook her head, focused on navigating the potholed street. The evening sun cast long shadows between the derelict warehouses, turning everything into rust and decay. But I knew what I'd heard. It wasn't the wind whistling through broken windows, or metal groaning in the autumn chill. It was a voice, small, but undeniably real. And it was calling to me. "Mom, stop the car." She glanced at me, surprised by the urgency in my voice. I was 17 then, in that phase where I barely spoke to her at all. But something in my expression must have convinced her, because she pulled over, the tires crunching on scattered gravel. That's when we found her, though at first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The place was a dump, literally. Old tires, broken furniture, and empty beer cans were scattered everywhere, telling silent stories of human carelessness. The air smelled like rust and decay, with undertones of motor oil and forgotten dreams. And there she was, curled up in the shadow of a rusted-out Chevrolet, her eyes crusted shut, her fur matted and filthy. She was meowing, no, screaming, like she was begging for someone, anyone, to notice her. It was the kind of sound that claws at your soul. I didn't want to touch her at first. She looked like something out of a nightmare, like a creature that didn't belong in this world. But my mom, she didn't hesitate for a second. I saw something in her eyes then, a fierce determination I hadn't seen since Dad left. She scooped the kitten up, wrapped her in an old towel she kept in the trunk, a habit from her shelter work, and said, "We're taking her home." I remember thinking, this cat's not going to make it. But we took her to the vet anyway. Dr. Martinez, our local vet, stayed late that evening to examine her. I'll never forget how gently he handled her, cleaning her crusted eyes with warm compresses, checking her tiny body for injuries. The prognosis wasn't good, she might not survive the week. Her eyes are infected, she's severely malnourished, and her vocal cords are damaged from all that crying. Even if she makes it, she'll probably never meow again. But that kitten, she was a fighter. We named her Hope, though it felt more like wishful thinking at the time. Those first few weeks were tough. Mom and I took turns feeding her with a tiny bottle every 2 hours, day and night. We cleaned her eyes with prescribed drops, gave her antibiotics, and kept her warm in a box lined with soft blankets next to my bed. For the first time since Dad left, Mom and I had something to talk about, something to share. We discuss Hope's progress over breakfast, celebrate small victories like her first solid meal, worry together when she seemed lethargic. Slowly, miraculously, her eyes opened. They were the most incredible shade of green I'd ever seen, like emeralds catching sunlight. Her fur grew back, soft and silver gray with subtle stripes, and she turned into the most beautiful cat I'd ever seen. But she never made a sound. Not a single meow. Just silence. Hope became part of our family. She'd sleep on my chest at night, her purrs vibrating through me like a gentle lullaby. She seemed to know when either Mom or I were having a bad day, appearing with perfect timing to offer comfort through her presence. Gradually, our home began to feel warmer, more alive. Mom started smiling more, real smiles that reached her eyes. I started spending more time in the living room instead of hiding in my bedroom. Hope had brought something back to us that we'd lost when Dad left, a sense of family. Years passed. I graduated high school with decent grades, not great, but good enough to get into the state college. Mom helped me move into my first apartment, and of course, Hope came with me. She was my connection to home, my constant companion as I tried to navigate the challenges of adult life. But things didn't go as planned. The economy tanked during my senior year, and the entry-level marketing job I'd lined up fell through. My girlfriend Sarah, who I'd been dating for 2 years, decided she couldn't handle the uncertainty of my situation and left me for a guy with a stable job and a trust fund. The student loans I'd taken out started coming due, and the part-time retail job I managed to find barely covered my rent, let alone the mounting debt. I felt like a failure. Every night, I'd come home to my increasingly bare apartment. I'd been selling things off to make ends meet, and feel the weight of disappointment crushing me. The loneliness was the worst part. I'd lie awake at night, Hope curled up beside me, staring at the ceiling and wondering if anyone would even notice if I disappeared. My mom called regularly, but I started avoiding her calls, ashamed of how badly I'd failed at adult life. One night, I hit rock bottom. I'd just received another rejection letter from a job application, and my bank account was overdrawn. The walls of my apartment felt like they were closing in on me. I found myself writing a note, to Mom, to Hope, to anyone who might care enough to read it. The words blurred through my tears as I wrote, apologizing for being such a disappointment, for not being strong enough to keep going. I don't even remember how I got to that point. It was like a fog had settled over my mind. I tied a rope to the beam in my garage, stood on a wobbly old chair, and slipped the noose around my neck. My hands were shaking, and my heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I took one last breath, closed my eyes, and... meow. It was soft at first, almost like I'd imagined it. But then it came again, louder this time. I opened my eyes, and there she was, Hope, my silent guardian. She'd somehow pushed open the garage window and jumped inside. She was pawing at my legs, looking up at me with those big, green eyes, and meowing like her life depended on it. Like my life depended on it. I froze. I'd never heard her make a sound before, not once in all the years we'd had her. But there she was, meowing with a voice that should have been destroyed long ago. It wasn't the weak, raspy sound the vet had warned us about. It was clear and strong, like a bell ringing in the silence. And in that moment, something inside me broke. I stepped off the chair, untied the rope with trembling fingers, and sank to the floor, sobbing. Hope climbed into my lap immediately, purring louder than I'd ever heard her, and I held her like she was the only thing keeping me anchored to this world. In many ways, she was. That night changed everything. The next morning, I called my mom and told her everything. She drove over immediately, and for the first time since I was a kid, I let her hold me while I cried. We talked for hours, about Dad, about failure, about hope. She helped me make a plan. I'd move back home temporarily, see a therapist, and rebuild my life one step at a time. It wasn't easy, but Hope was there every step of the way. She'd sit with me while I filled out job applications, her presence a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. She'd curl up next to me during therapy homework, purring encouragingly as I worked through my feelings. And every now and then, usually when I was feeling particularly low, she'd let out a soft meow, as if to say, I'm still here, and so are you. That was 5 years ago. I'm in a better place now, working as a marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit. I have my own place again, but this time it's filled with hope instead of despair. Mom comes over for dinner every Sunday, and our relationship is stronger than ever. And Hope, she's 18 now, and her fur is starting to gray around the edges, but she's still as beautiful as ever. She still sleeps on my chest every night, still greets me at the door when I come home, and still offers the occasional miraculous meow when she thinks I need to hear it. Every time I look at her, I'm reminded of that night in the garage, of the sound of her meow cutting through the silence like a lifeline. She's more than just a cat, she's my family, my lifeline, my reminder that even when life feels hopeless, there's still a reason to keep fighting. She saved me twice, once when we found her in that abandoned lot, though I didn't know it then, and again in that garage when she gave me back my voice by finding her own. I don't know how many more years we'll have together. The vet says she's healthy for her age, but I know our time is limited. Yet every day with her is a gift, a reminder that sometimes the most broken things can heal, and that love, even from a small, once silent cat, can be enough to light the way through the darkest nights. And for that, I'll always be grateful.